On the surface, the Jacksons seemed to have it all. Marcus Jackson, 42, was a successful real estate developer in Atlanta's booming market. His new wife, Jasmine, 27, turned heads wherever she went. And his son from his first marriage, DeAndre, 17, was a star athlete at Westlake High School. They lived in a beautiful mansion in the prestigious Cascade Heights neighborhood where old money met new success. But behind the mahogany doors of their 5-bedroom home, darkness was growing. It started in January 2022 when Marcus married Jasmine after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. DeAndre's mother had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier, and Marcus thought it was time to give his son a new mother figure. They looked so happy at the wedding, recalled Marcus's sister, Tamika. Jasmine was young and beautiful, and Marcus was like a teenager again. DeAndre even smiled during the ceremony. We thought it was a fresh start for everyone. No one could have predicted how tragically wrong things would go. The first hints of trouble came during family gatherings. Neighbors and relatives noticed strange tensions between Marcus and his son. Marcus would snap at DeAndre for little things, said neighbor Mrs. Robinson, 68. If the boy looked at Jasmine too long, or if they laughed together at the dinner table, Marcus would get this look in his eyes. We should have seen it coming. By summer 2022, things had shifted in the Jackson household. Jasmine started missing family events. DeAndre became quiet and withdrawn. Marcus threw himself into work, sometimes staying at the office until midnight. DeAndre stopped coming to basketball practice, said his coach, Michael Thompson. This was a kid who lived for basketball, who had college scouts looking at him. Something wasn't right. On September 15, 2022, Marcus came home early from a business trip. He wasn't expected until the next day. What he found would shatter their carefully constructed facade forever. September 15, 2022, started like any other autumn day in Atlanta. The temperature hit 82 degrees by noon, and the city hummed with its usual energy. Marcus Jackson's black Mercedes pulled into his circular driveway at 2:47 p.m., 5 hours after his assistant had canceled all his afternoon meetings. Security camera footage from the neighbor's house would later show Marcus sitting in his car for exactly 12 minutes before entering his home. What happened in those 12 minutes would become a crucial point in the investigation. He just sat there, staring at the house, said Detective Lisa Williams of the Atlanta Police Department. The car wasn't running. He wasn't on his phone. He just sat there. When Marcus finally entered his home, the house was quiet. Too quiet for a Thursday afternoon when both Jasmine and DeAndre should have been home. The security system showed no one had left the house that day. Marcus later told investigators he heard sounds coming from the main bedroom upstairs. What he found there would trigger a chain of events that would shock Atlanta's elite black community and make national headlines. The master bedroom door was slightly ajar. Marcus would later tell police he heard Jasmine's distinctive laugh, the same laugh that had first attracted him to her at a charity gala last year. Then he heard another laugh, a younger, deeper one, his son's. The scene that greeted Marcus would be described in painful detail during the trial. Jasmine and DeAndre were on the king-sized bed Marcus had bought just 3 months ago. They weren't intimate at that moment. They were just talking, looking at something on DeAndre's phone. But their closeness, their comfort with each other, told Marcus everything he needed to know. When I opened that door, Marcus later told detectives, it was like time stopped. Everything I thought I knew about my family turned to ash right there. What happened next came out during Jasmine's testimony. She sat straight-backed in the witness stand, her hands folded in her lap, her voice steady despite the tears running down her face. Marcus just stood there, she testified. DeAndre jumped up first. He started saying, "Dad, I can explain." But before he could say anything else, I told Marcus myself. I said, "I'm pregnant, and it's DeAndre's baby." The courtroom fell silent at this revelation. Even the judge, who had presided over countless family tragedy cases, had to call for a brief recess. According to Jasmine's testimony, Marcus's first reaction wasn't violent. He walked out of the room without saying a word. They heard him go downstairs, and for 15 minutes there was silence. "I told DeAndre to pack a bag and leave," Jasmine testified. "I knew Marcus. I knew what was coming." But DeAndre wouldn't go. He said he had to explain to his father, make him understand. He said he loved me. At 3:42 p.m., Marcus returned upstairs. Security footage from the home system would later show him first going to his study, where he kept his gun. But he didn't take it. Instead, he grabbed the sterling silver baseball bat that had been presented to him at a charity event, an ironic symbol of his philanthropic work with inner-city youth sports programs. DeAndre was sitting on the edge of the bed when his father returned. Jasmine had moved to the corner of the room, one hand protectively over her stomach. "I kept saying, 'Marcus, please,'" Jasmine testified, "but it was like he couldn't hear me." His eyes were focused on DeAndre, and there was something in them I'd never seen before. What happened next was pieced together from Jasmine's testimony, physical evidence, and Marcus's own confession. The first blow caught DeAndre on the shoulder as he tried to stand. The second hit him in the back as he attempted to shield himself. DeAndre didn't fight back, Jasmine told the court, her voice breaking. He just kept saying, "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry," over and over. The medical examiner would later count 17 distinct blows. The fatal one was the 9th, a strike to the temple that caused immediate brain trauma. At 4:03 p.m., Jasmine managed to call 911. The recording would later be played in court. "Operator, 911, what's your emergency? Please come. He's killing him. Marcus is killing DeAndre." "What's the address?" Jasmine, 4892 Cascade Heights Drive. "Please hurry. There's so much blood." Police arrived 6 minutes later. They found Marcus sitting on the bedroom floor, cradling his son's body. The silver bat, now stained red, lay forgotten in the corner. News of the tragedy spread quickly through Atlanta's affluent Black community. The Jacksons weren't just any family. They were symbols of success, of making it in a system that often seemed stacked against them. "This family represented something to us," said Reverend James Mitchell of Greater Hope Baptist Church. Marcus had built himself up from nothing. DeAndre was headed to college on a scholarship. They were living the dream. And then, the news crews arrived before the coroner's van had even left. Channel 2 Action News broke the story at 6 p.m., interrupting regular programming. By nightfall, Cascade Heights Drive was lined with satellite trucks, their lights illuminating the manicured lawns like some macabre theater. "I've never seen anything like it," said Officer James Williams, first responder on the scene. "Usually in domestic cases, there's screaming, chaos. But Marcus just sat there, holding his boy, as quiet as death itself." Detective Sarah Martinez led the investigation. A 20-year veteran of Atlanta PD's Homicide Division, she'd seen her share of family tragedies, but this was different. "The crime scene told a story of escalation," Martinez explained. "There were signs of a struggle, but only defensive wounds on the victim. DeAndre never threw a single punch at his father. That stays with you." In the interrogation room, Jasmine revealed the full story. The affair had started 3 months after the wedding, during a time when Marcus was frequently traveling for business. "DeAndre would help me with things around the house," Jasmine told detectives. "We'd watch movies together, talk about everything. He was lonely after his mother died, and I was lonely in this big house. It just happened." She was 4 months pregnant when Marcus discovered them. At Westlake High School, DeAndre's absence left a palpable void. His locker became a makeshift memorial, covered with basketball jerseys, photos, and notes from classmates. "DeAndre was more than just our star player," Coach Thompson said, fighting back tears during a press conference. "He was the kid who stayed late to help freshmen with their shooting form. He was the one who organized study groups before games. He had a full ride to Duke University waiting for him." As details of Marcus Jackson's life emerged, a complex picture formed. Born in the Bowen Homes housing project, he'd worked his way through Georgia State University, starting his real estate business with a single foreclosed property. "Marcus was proof that you could make it," said childhood friend Derek Robinson. "He used to mentor kids from the old neighborhood, telling them education was the way out. Now those same kids are watching him face murder charges." Marcus's first wife, Shanice, had died of breast cancer 3 years earlier. Friends described how her death changed both father and son. "They were all each other had," said Marcus's sister Tamika. "DeAndre was the spitting image of his mama, and I think that made it harder for Marcus. Then when he brought Jasmine home, we thought it was too soon. But who were we to judge? Medical records confirmed Jasmine's pregnancy. She was carrying a boy. The DNA test results, rushed through due to the case's high profile, confirmed DeAndre's paternity. The pregnancy was the trigger, explained Dr. Rachel Chen, forensic psychologist. It wasn't just the affair. It was the permanent, irrefutable evidence of his son taking his place as a man and with his own wife. Marcus's arrest and booking happened mechanically, almost quietly. His longtime attorney, Howard Green, immediately began building a defense. "We're looking at a heat of passion defense," Green told reporters. This was a man who discovered the ultimate betrayal. His son and his wife, the mother of what he thought would be his child. The case split Atlanta's Black community. Some defended Marcus, pointing to the unthinkable betrayal he'd endured. Others saw him as destroying the very future he'd worked so hard to build for his son. "This case forces us to look at uncomfortable truths," said Dr. Michael Johnson, sociologist at Morehouse College. "About masculinity, about power, about how we handle family trauma in our community." By October 2022, the story had gone national. Major networks descended on Atlanta, each trying to get exclusive angles on what they called the Cascade Heights horror. Inside Edition ran a special titled "Love, Betrayal, and Murder in Atlanta's Black Elite." CNN's Don Lemon hosted a town hall discussing domestic violence in affluent African-American families. Social media exploded with hashtags "Justice for DeAndre" and "Atlanta Tragedy" trended for weeks. While Marcus sat in Fulton County Jail, Jasmine faced her own struggles. She moved in with her sister in Stone Mountain, trying to avoid the media spotlight while dealing with her high-risk pregnancy. "I loved them both," she told Essence magazine in an exclusive interview. "I know people won't understand that. Sometimes I don't understand it myself. But DeAndre, he had his father's ambition, but his mother's gentle heart." As prosecutors built their case, disturbing patterns emerged. Cell phone records showed hundreds of text messages between Jasmine and DeAndre. Security cameras caught late-night swimming pool encounters. Credit card statements revealed secret lunches when Marcus was supposedly at work. "They weren't even trying to hide it toward the end," Detective Martinez noted. "It's like they were in their own world, thinking love would somehow make it okay." From jail, Marcus wrote daily letters to his dead son. These would later be introduced as evidence of his mental state. "Dear DeAndre, remember when you were 6 and I taught you to ride that blue bike? You fell so many times, but you never cried. You just got back up. You were always stronger than me. How did we end up here, son? How did I become the monster who took away everything you could have been?" Duke University's basketball coach made a powerful statement at a press conference. "DeAndre Jackson wasn't just another recruit. He was going to be special. We had plans for him to start as a freshman. Now, instead of watching him play in Cameron Indoor Stadium, we're all watching this tragedy unfold." Westlake High School retired DeAndre's number 23 jersey in a ceremony that brought together students, teachers, and even rival schools. "He would have hated all this attention," said his best friend, Marcus Thompson Jr. D was humble. Even when scouts came to games, he'd pass the ball, make sure everyone got their shots. That's who he was. As Jasmine's due date approached, new legal questions arose. Would the baby have inheritance rights to both father's and grandfather's estates? Would Marcus have any legal rights as the child's grandfather? Her doctor, Dr. Patricia Williams, observed, "She talks to the baby about DeAndre every visit. She wants this child to know his father was more than just a headline." In November 2022, Marcus attempted suicide in his cell. Guards found him trying to hang himself with his bedsheet. "I keep seeing him," he told the prison psychiatrist. "Every night, DeAndre stands in my cell. He doesn't say anything. He just looks at me with his mother's eyes." The extended Jackson family fractured. Some supported Marcus, viewing Jasmine as a seductress who destroyed their family. Others stood by Jasmine, seeing her as another victim of Marcus's rage. "Sunday dinners used to bring 30 people to Mama's house," Tamika explained. "Now we can't even be in the same room." One tragedy turned into 100 little ones. The trial started in January 2023. The courthouse steps became a daily spectacle of protesters, supporters, and media. Inside, the prosecution painted Marcus as a controlling man whose pride led to murder. The defense portrayed him as a loving father, driven to temporary insanity by ultimate betrayal. The prosecution opened strong. Assistant District Attorney Regina Harris stood before the jury, her voice steady and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a story about betrayal. This is a story about control. When Marcus Jackson couldn't control his son, couldn't control his wife, he chose to destroy what he couldn't control. The defense countered with emotion. Howard Green addressed the predominantly black jury. Put yourself in Marcus Jackson's shoes. Everything he built, everything he worked for, was betrayed in the most intimate way possible. This wasn't a premeditated murder. This was a father's heart shattering. Over 3 weeks, the prosecution methodically presented their case. Crime scene photos showed the blood-spattered bedroom. The silver bat mounted on a display board drew gasps from the gallery. The medical examiner detailed each of the 17 blows, using a mannequin to demonstrate the angles. The 9th blow was fatal, Dr. James Chen testified, pointing to a diagram of DeAndre's skull. But Mr. Jackson continued to strike his son 8 more times after death had occurred. 7 months pregnant, Jasmine testified for 2 full days. She detailed the progression of her relationship with DeAndre, from maternal figure to lover. It started with conversations, she testified. Deep conversations about life, about loss. We both missed his mother, but in different ways. He showed me pictures, told me stories. Then one night, he kissed me. I should have stopped it, but I didn't want to. The prosecution's strongest evidence came from the home security system. Silent footage showed Marcus entering the house, the 12-minute wait in his car, the journey to his study for the bat. Most damaging was the audio captured by the system. You think you can take my wife? You think you can replace me? Marcus's voice rang through the courtroom. DeAndre's pleas for mercy followed, then the terrible sounds of the bat. DeAndre's basketball teammates testified about changes they'd noticed in their friend. He stopped hanging out after practice, said Jerome Wilson, point guard. He was always rushing home. We teased him about having a secret girlfriend. We had no idea. Psychologists testified for both sides. The defense brought Dr. Michael Foster, who specialized in trauma response. Mr. Jackson experienced what we call acute betrayal trauma. In that moment, he wasn't seeing his son. He was seeing the destruction of everything he'd built. The prosecution countered with Dr. Sarah Martinez. This wasn't a momentary lapse. The defendant had 12 minutes in his car to consider his actions. He chose the bat over his gun because he wanted his son to suffer. Against his attorney's advice, Marcus insisted on testifying. For 6 hours, he alternated between composed testimony and emotional breakdowns. I loved my son, he said, tears streaming down his face. Everything I did was for him. The house, the schools, even marrying Jasmine. I thought he needed a mother figure. How did love turn into this? During the trial's 3rd week, Jasmine went into labor. The timing created a media circus outside Grady Memorial Hospital. At 3:47 a.m. on February 12, 2023, DeAndre Jackson Jr. was born. The birth certificate listed DeAndre as the father. The space for grandfather was left blank. ADA Harris's closing argument was clinical. 17 blows. That's what this case comes down to. Not 1, not 2, but 17. Each one a choice, each one an intention. Each one brings a father closer to murdering his only son. Defense attorney Green appealed to emotion. This is a tragedy of Greek proportions. A father who wanted everything for his son, destroyed by forces he couldn't control. Don't compound this tragedy with another. After 4 days of deliberation on February 28, 2023, the jury reached their decision. The courthouse fell silent as the 4 women stood. In the matter of the state of Georgia versus Marcus Jackson, on the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus stood motionless as the verdict was read. In the gallery, Tamika collapsed into sobs. Jasmine, holding her newborn son, closed her eyes and whispered what appeared to be a prayer. The sentencing hearing brought powerful victim impact statements. First was Jasmine, now with 2-week-old DeAndre Jr. in her arms. Marcus, I know you'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. But DeAndre was a grown man who made his own choices. He loved me, and I loved him. You didn't just kill your son, you killed this baby's father and part of your own legacy. DeAndre's basketball coach spoke next. Your Honor, I've been coaching for 30 years. DeAndre wasn't just our best player, he was our heart. Kids from the projects looked up to him. He showed them there was a way out that didn't involve drugs or gangs. His death ripples far beyond this courtroom. Before sentencing, Marcus made his final statement. "I look at my hands now, and I don't recognize them. These hands that once cradled my son, taught him to dribble a ball, helped him with homework. These same hands took his life. I don't ask for mercy. I don't deserve it. I just ask that somehow, someday, DeAndre's son will know his father was more than his death." Judge Evelyn Carter, known for her tough sentencing, spoke deliberately. "Mr. Jackson, you exemplified the American dream, rising from poverty to prominence. But with success came pride, and with pride came the fatal flaw of believing you owned rather than raised your son. I sentence you to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The verdict made national headlines. The New York Times ran a front-page story titled, "Death of a Dream: How Atlanta's Black Elite Was Shattered." ESPN produced a documentary called The Game He Never Played, focusing on DeAndre's lost potential. Jasmine moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, seeking anonymity to raise her son. She wrote a memoir, Between Two Jacksons, with proceeds going to a foundation for young athletes from single-parent homes. "I'm not hiding from our stories," she wrote, "but I want DJ to grow up somewhere he can be himself, not just DeAndre's son or Marcus's grandson." The tragedy sparked changes in Atlanta's affluent Black community. Greater Hope Baptist Church started a counseling program specifically for blended families. Westlake High School instituted a mentoring program named after DeAndre. Marcus was sent to Georgia State Prison in Reidsville. Reports from his first year showed him to be a model prisoner, leading Bible studies and counseling younger inmates. He refused all interview requests but continued writing letters, now to his grandson. DeAndre Jr. grew to be the image of his father. Jasmine documented his milestones on a private Instagram account, accessible only to select family members. His first steps came at 11 months, the same age his father had started walking. "Sometimes when he laughs," Tamika said after visiting them, "it's like hearing DeAndre all over again. It breaks your heart and heals it at the same time." By March 2024, the case had become a cautionary tale studied in law schools across the South. Harvard Law Review published an analysis titled The Jackson Case: Intersection of Race, Class, and Criminal Justice in Modern America. The Jackson house in Cascade Heights remained empty. Its pristine lawn, maintained by a service Marcus's business partner, continued to pay for. Real estate agents whispered that despite its prime location, no one wanted to live where it happened. Jasmine established the DeAndre Jackson Legacy Foundation, focusing on 3 areas: basketball scholarships for underprivileged youth, counseling services for blended families, and support for children who lost parents to domestic violence. DeAndre always said he wanted to give back, Jasmine explained at the foundation's launch. This is how his dream lives on. Netflix released Family Court, a 3-part documentary series examining the case. The series sparked renewed debate about criminal justice reform, with particular focus on crimes of passion versus premeditated murder. Notable was the appearance of Marcus's cellmate, who described their conversations. "He wakes up every night at 3:42. The exact time he went upstairs with that bat. He says it's DeAndre, coming to ask why. Always why." Dr. Angela Rivers, professor of African American Studies at Spelman College, published a comprehensive study, The Price of Progress: Class Mobility and Family Dynamics in Black America. Her research used the Jackson case to explore broader themes. What we see in this tragedy is the collision of old wounds and new wealth. Marcus Jackson carried the trauma of poverty even after becoming wealthy. His son represented both his greatest achievement and his deepest vulnerability. Shanice Jackson's presence loomed large over subsequent analyses. Friends revealed she had been the family's emotional center, the buffer between father and son. After Shanice died, her sister revealed, Marcus tried to be both father and mother. He smothered DeAndre with expectations while starving him of the emotional connection he craved. In many ways, Jasmine filled that void, with tragic consequences. The NBA launched an initiative called the DeAndre Project, providing counseling and support services to young athletes dealing with family trauma. Several players, including those who had met DeAndre during recruitment, became ambassadors. The case influenced several subsequent trials involving family violence. The Jackson defense became shorthand for cases where discovering infidelity led to violence, though few judges were sympathetic to it. In early 2024, Jasmine published Letters to DJ, a collection of messages to her son about his father. The book became a bestseller, praised for its raw honesty about love, guilt, and redemption. Your father was not a saint, and he was not a villain. He was a young man who loved deeply and paid the ultimate price for that love. Your grandfather was not a monster, but a man whose love turned to poison when mixed with pride. Both of them live in you, but you will write your own story. Marcus started a prison ministry called Father's Lament, helping inmates maintain relationships with their children despite incarceration. The program gained national attention for its success in reducing recidivism among participating fathers. The case prompted a study by Emory University Medical School on acute rage responses in high-achieving individuals. Researchers noted a pattern they called success-induced isolation, where professional accomplishment created emotional blind spots.